Today we will be talking about the Peace River watershed, focusing on how hydropower and oil and gas development have shaped its landscape, water quality, and ecology. We'll start with an overview of the watershed's physical characteristics, then discuss land use, key challenges, and potential management solutions. Understanding these impacts is crucial for balancing resource development with long-term watershed sustainability. The Peace River watershed spans British Columbia and Alberta, covering about 324,000 kilometers squared. It's part of the Mackenzie River Basin, which drains into the Arctic Ocean. The river stretches nearly 2,000 kilometers, carrying over 68 trillion liters of water annually. It starts in the Rocky Mountains and moves east, shaping the landscape and supporting ecosystems along the way. Most of the watershed, about 66%, is covered by temperate and subpolar needle-leaf forests. Shrubland makes up 13%, cropland 8%, and grassland 6%. These land cover types influence water retention, climate regulation, and ecosystem health. The west remains largely forested, while agriculture dominates in the east, contributing to land use changes. The watershed features diverse landscapes: the Rocky Mountains in the west, foothills transitioning into flatter terrain, and large floodplains like the Peace Athabasca Delta. Water comes from multiple sources. Snowmelt and glaciers feed the headwaters, rainfall influences seasonal flow, groundwater sustains base flow, and hydroelectric reservoirs have altered natural flow patterns. The watershed experiences strong seasonal flow variations. Spring snowmelt causes the biggest fluctuations, while long-term trends show increased spring precipitation and decreased winter snowfall. The WAC Bennett Dam has also altered the flow, reducing early summer discharge while increasing winter flow in some tributaries. Geology plays a key role in groundwater storage and water chemistry. The Rocky Mountains contain shale and fractured limestone aquifers, while the northern region has sandstone aquifers used for domestic water supply. Glacial till and river deposits also store groundwater. Naturally, water here is hard due to calcium and magnesium, but human activities like agriculture and oil extraction have introduced contaminants such as nitrates, phosphorus, and hydrocarbons. About 57% of the watershed has been altered by agriculture, forestry, oil and gas, and mining. Agriculture alone accounts for 25% of this disturbance, mostly in Alberta. These changes have led to declining water quality, increased flooding, and sedimentation. Oil and gas extraction has contaminated groundwater, while deforestation has worsened erosion and runoff. Water quality concerns stem from sedimentation, contamination from oil and gas, and nutrient runoff from agriculture. Many lakes have high phosphorus levels, causing eutrophication and algal blooms. Some communities, like the Kelly Lake Métis, have reported worsening water conditions, including an oil-like scent in the water and even combustible gas in their pipes. Flooding has become more common, particularly in the Halfway River area of northern BC. Wetlands and forests help absorb excess water, but land disturbances like deforestation and development reduce the watershed's ability to manage floods, making them more severe.
So we'll now have a look at the main water users, key historical and current management decisions, and the key stakeholders affected by and involved in watershed management decisions. So water use within this watershed utilizes both surface and groundwater resources and has consumptive and non-consumptive uses. So BC Hydro is a large user and controller of the water resource for electrical power generation and managing of river flow. The main dam that regulates flow is the WAC Bennett Dam, and there's power production here at this facility, and then also at Peace Canyon and Site C Dam as well. Oil and gas operations utilize water for all types of their extraction methods. It is important to note that in Alberta, saline groundwater and produced water do not require licenses, but the quantity used still has to be reported. Within the watershed, other water users include the forestry sector, pulp and paper mills, road construction, livestock operations, off-river water storage for non-power applications, and then obviously municipal uses as well. Now have a brief look at watershed management. So laws and regulations have had a large impact on activities that affect the watershed. So the Alberta Water Act and BC Water Sustainability Act govern water allocations in the respective provinces. And then there's many federal acts that play a role in water resource management, regulate pollution, and fisheries. Municipal governments, although they govern small areas within this watershed, often manage intensive land use activities, so are critical in the management approach. Hydropower dams, oil and gas, mining and forestry development plans in the past have all impacted the watershed in their own ways. Historically, some of these resource development decisions haven't put equal weight on considering all aspects of a triple bottom line analysis. Um, Under the Alberta Land Use Framework, some land use regions have completed regional plans to support management and land use planning to better balance the triple bottom line approach. But the upper and lower Peace regional plans of this watershed have yet to be completed, so therefore represent a gap in an integrated watershed management approach. In 2015, the Alberta Land Use Review Panel suggested that on the regional land use planning should be guided by traditional land use management framework to better capture and integrate Indigenous knowledge and reflect constitutionally protected treaty rights. This watershed does currently have an integrated watershed management plan, and I believe is reviewed every 10 years. To date, most of the significant impacts on the watershed have been from these three operations. So hydropower development has led to obviously changes in flow regime and changes to subsistence practices and navigation. Also increased seismic activity from creation of reservoirs, which affects groundwater flow paths and contamination. And then both oil and natural gas operations have somewhat similar impacts, particularly use and contamination of groundwater resources and leakage of contaminated storage ponds that affect more so surface waters. Some of the key stakeholders that are affected by and involved in management decisions are the general public, Indigenous and Métis groups of the region, recreational users, the energy industry, both for power production and resource extraction, livestock farmers, and other commercial businesses. And it is important to note there's many stakeholders that don't ever seem to be represented by a seat at the table, and those are all the other life forms that utilize and depend on the watershed and its services.
Part 3. Significant Challenges and Conflict Resolution. Some of the most significant conflicts in the Peace River watershed have been between Indigenous groups and the government and industry responsible for hydropower dams. The W.A.C. Bennett Dam and Williston Lake Reservoir were created in 1968 after the Premier of BC, after whom the dam was named, nationalized BC Electric and Peace River Power Development Company in order to move the dam along. This was an extremely important event in the region's history. It provided nationalized power to the growing province, but it had devastating impacts on many Indigenous peoples, especially the Sicanni people. Today, the Sicanni are made of three groups: the Quadacha, McLeod Lake, and Seke Dene bands. The provincial government and BC Hydro conducted consultations with the Sicanni before implementation of the dam, but all were done through Indian Affairs instead of directly with the nations. Significant impacts included physical loss of traditional lands, change in the regional climate, loss of transportation and connectivity, and loss of food sources. Despite all this, the province provided compensation to very few people, and what they delivered was very small. In 2016, BC Hydro's deputy CEO issued an apology for the events that took place, opening an art gallery in the dam's visitors center called Our Story, Our Voice, which centered the stories and perspectives of many Indigenous people affected. but some bands refused to participate. Unfortunately, the Site C Dam, the third BC hydro dam on the Peace River, risks repeating many, if not all, of these harms, and threatens the already uniquely vulnerable Daneza people. The Treaty 8 Indigenous Watchdog states that the Site C Dam project undermines treaty rights, and the province does not uphold these due to its vested interest in the project's success. This graph, created by the Treaty 8 First Nations Community Assessment Team, demonstrates the importance of this region that is now flooded by the Site C Dam. On that note, there has been a huge increase in Indigenous-led research, monitoring, and stewardship in the region. For example, Mikisew Cree First Nation has created a community-based monitoring plan. Their recent findings indicate drastic changes to the region. Back in 1982, the Peace Athabasca Delta was designated as a Ramsar site, a wetland of international significance. 80% of the Ramsar site is within Wood Bison National Park, which is also a designated World Heritage Site. The IUCN made a statement on the conservation outlook of the park in 2020, again emphasizing the impacts of climate change and hydrological alteration to the region, and they warn that the delta is at significant risk due to industrial development. While efforts have been made, major threats do not originate in the park, nor can they be solved there. Outside of the park, there are numerous local and regional restoration efforts. For example, the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance supports multiple ongoing projects, like the Smoky Headwaters Initiative, Grimshaw Gravels Aquifer Source Water Protection Plan, and the Willow Watershed Restoration Project.
State of watershed management. Here are some areas for improvement based on recent and historical watershed management practices. Overall, historical management practices typically lacked Indigenous stakeholder input or had very superficial or insufficient amounts, and projects are often completed while infringing on treaty rights. Implementing ICPAs may aid in Indigenous communities' ability to legally defend land that directly affects them and their way of life. Historical management practices often lacked communication between levels of government, and even between governments, such as between Alberta and BC. These factors can lead to confusion about the assumption of responsibilities. The legal framework, whether provincial or federal, should have stricter regulations around severely ecosystem harming practices, like many performed by extractive industries. This would potentially cut down many of the cumulative effects of these practices, reducing the need for several resource-heavy restoration projects. Now to provide an overview of the most recent Integrated Watershed Management Plan. The Integrated Watershed Management Plan was developed by the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance for both the Peace and Slave watersheds that straddle the upper and lower Peace basins, as no land use framework has existed for these areas at a regional level prior. Many concerns about terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem health and function, drinking water quality, and industrial use were incorporated into the plan, with priority given to non-saline groundwater, water quality and availability away from the main stem, wetlands and wetland loss, the Peace River's flow regime, and consumptive use of fresh water. The planning process for this management plan involved perspectives and advice received from many stakeholders, big and small, and from diverse groups such as conservation advisors, local communities, and industrial representatives. The framework for the plan utilizes an iterative process known as adaptive management to ensure consistent, incremental progress towards management goals. As mentioned before, the list of collaborators for this plan is quite large and diverse, including several provincial agencies, many non-government stakeholders, Indigenous communities, and the general public being key contributors, industry reps, and even educational institutions. Now for our notes on this management plan. Where this plan did well was the incorporation of perspectives from many stakeholder groups from a broad range of backgrounds, which helped develop concerns for a wide range of social, environmental, and economic factors. The plan considers not just the individual impacts, but their cumulative effects as well. The plan is adaptive, ensuring long term viability and continual progress. Some limitations to this plan was the restriction to Alberta's borders, including stakeholder input. Though the watershed crosses into BC, there was no collaboration with any BC organizations. Overall, this watershed management plan is a huge step up compared to historical management practices and inspires confidence in the long term sustainable management of the Peace River watershed. Thanks for watching.